pas trop de trafic. Non. Non, je ne pense pas que ce sera l'hiver sévère. Normal. La neige qui a rarement longtemps les dernières années. Okay, parfois on a 30 cm à coup, mais ça tient une semaine, 2 semaines. Ça commence à pleuvoir, je connais ça. Mais tu sais, nous, dans la région, on a l'habitude. C'est pas... En Wallonie, j'étais l'année où j'étais à Liège. Il y a 2 cm de neige. Et c'est le cas de Paris. Et là, nous, bon, c'est un peu chaotique. Si sur une nuit, il y a 30 cm de neige, c'est quand même le temps de tout, que le route soit bien dégagé. Tout le monde roule doucement, tu mets plus de temps, ça c'est clair. Il y a toujours des camions qui sont sortis. Il y a toujours des voitures qui sont sorties. Qui est déjà venu en hiver? Oui, pour les marées à pluie à l'époque.
Bon après-midi à tous. On n'est pas très loin de la Suisse ici. Donc on commence à 3 heures pile. 1 minute? Oui. Non, juste bien. C'est déjà, voilà. Donc on va commencer avec les tests des écouteurs. À quelle langue elle parle, Geneviève? Quelle langue elle parle, Geneviève? Français. Ouais. Donc tout le monde va parler en français cet après-midi. Ça facilitera la chose pour les traducteurs. Très bien.
Ok.
Vous écoutez quel... Hein? Et ça fonctionne, italiano? Bene. Così on a déjà une langue qui fonctionne.
French obviously works. I assume English works. You hear? Dutch. So Dutch should be on channel 13.
Si tout le monde peut rentrer dans la salle, s'il vous plaît, prendre un écouteur.
L'italien, ça fonctionne déjà. Les Netherlands fonctionne aussi. Et l'anglais.
What about English? Can you hear the English? Can you wave at... can you please raise your hand if channel 14 is okay? Is it working? Can you hear the English? Testing the English. It is working. Just nobody's listening to me yet. 14, does it work? Okay.
Yes, now you can try it again. Yes? No, he is not hearing. Yes, now it's okay, thank you. English, l'anglais, ça va aussi déjà. Donc on a déjà l'italien, le néerlandais, and English, and you, italiano. Uh-huh. Et il faut le serbe aussi, on a toujours...
Oui, le serbe. Est-ce que non, il
No?
n'y a
Serbe
rien en
non
serbe pour le
ancora.
moment.
Ah. Il manque encore quelqu'un pour la traduction?
On a encore au streaming.
Oui, après, quand tout le monde va être là, va dire bonjour. Tu vas dire bonjour.
Non, tu vas dire non. Je me demande, je suis seule aujourd'hui.
Oui, je dois un peu rattraper. Et la traduction pour la Serbie, peux encore l'essayer. Ça va? Oui, tu entends? Non? Pas encore? Pas encore la Serbie, on attendra encore un petit peu. Ah, voilà. La Serbie?
Geen Nederlands blijkbaar. Nummer 13, dames. Oké, het werd. Okay, apparently we should ask in English if Serbian is working.
Is listening. Serbia is working? No? Loro, it will come afterwards from Italian. Not. Ok. Donc la Serbie, la traduction pour les Serbes, ça marche pas encore?
Un petit rappel entre-temps, le GSM peut-être, ceux qui ont été débloqués pendant la pause, de les rééteindre si c'est possible.
Et est-ce que quelqu'un se rappelle de Company Cube? Qu'est-ce qu'on voulait vivre aujourd'hui? Quelqu'un se rappelle? C'était déjà très très loin. Voilà, les relations, construire des relations. Comme ça, on peut continuer l'après-midi avec ça aussi. Voilà.
Je pense qu'on peut doucement reprendre le programme. Donc maintenant, on va avoir d'abord Geneviève Sanzé qui va venir nous parler de la souffrance et les périphéries existentielles et l'apport de l'économie de communion là-dedans.
Bonjour au streaming.
Bonjour au streaming, pardon, que j'oublie. J'espère que ça fonctionne encore. Mais apparemment, oui. Bienvenue dans la salle. On n'a pas encore de façon de vous faire parvenir les questions, mais...
Welcome to you.
Mail
you're not there, you're with
passe
us
toujours.
online.
Voilà, mais Geneviève, elle est prête.
So
Parfait.
Geneviève is ready.
Alors, bonsoir à tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Je pense ce matin, ça a été un moment très beau où on remercie.
I think the morning session has been really, really nice, very interesting. I'd like to thank Anouk and everybody.
Ce matin, on a développé des points très importants pour l'économie de communion.
I think we talked about key aspects this morning.
Les entrepreneurs et leur vie.
We talked about company managers, entrepreneurs. We talked about sharing,
Des bénéfices.
particularly profit sharing.
Et cet après-midi, comme vous le voyez, on a
This afternoon,
un peu plus de la pauvreté.
we're going to
Alors, je
look at
vous
other
propose
aspects,
mon
and
texte.
particularly at poverty.
C'est pas ça, mais
So those slides are actually not mine. I think these are Anouk's slides. Can I have my slides on, please?
non, pas maintenant. Pas maintenant, oui. Alors, le premier point, il n'y a rien à voir avec ce qui est sur l'écran. Le premier point, je vais parler d'une manière succincte.
What I want to do
L'égalité
is
et
first
ses conséquences.
talk about inequality and its
Le
consequences.
capitalisme et son fonctionnement normal conduisent à un
Capitalism
monde de plus en plus
leads to
inégal.
a world that is
Nous voyons
more
des
and more
inégalités
unequal,
croissantes
with more and
dans
more
notre
inequalities
société.
growing.
Le travail,
in
un des
size.
travaux le plus éloquent que j'ai lu ces derniers temps,
And I've read something about this recently.
c'est de Piketty,
by Piketty 4 years ago.
Clairement que le monde se convertit en un monde de plus en plus inégal.
And in his book he says that
L'inégalité se mondialise.
there is inequality more and more.
L'inégalité sera le
Inequality
plus grand obstacle
is
à la fraternité
becoming
au message
globalized,
de la fraternité,
and it is the
qui est
biggest
l'objectif
obstacle
fondamental
to
de l'économie de communauté.
true brotherhood and
Cette
true
pulvérisation
living
de
together.
l'inégalité sera le plus grand obstacle
And he
que
says
nous aurons à affronter.
that this is the major
À
obstacle
savoir
that we'll have to
comment
face in the
distinguer
future.
avec
How
notre vision
can we
qui est
contribute
celle
now
de la
to
fraternité.
deal with this inequality
Certes, en regardant
through
autour
our
de
vision
nous,
of fraternity and
cela
brotherhood?
semble
Well,
utopique.
of course it looks like it's
Parce que nous
impossible to
sommes
achieve
conscients de la
when
grande
you
crise
look
qui
around,
traverse
and
notre
clearly
humanité
we
sur
are
ces 20 ans.
facing a crisis there with a lot more
Le mot
inequality
crise
now.
est ambivalent parce qu'il a un aspect
Even though
négatif
the
qui
word
indique
crisis
un problème non résolu,
is
mais
ambivalent.
il contient aussi
Crisis
un
means
aspect positif,
problem
car
that
une
has not yet been
crise
solved,
est une
but
préannonce
a
de
crisis is
croissance. Ou
also
à long terme.
somehow the
Un
starting
sociologue
of
argentin,
something
Jean
else, of
Carlos
change.
Tedesco, a décrit la crise comme la
And
distance critique entre ce que
some
nous
philosophers
n'obtenons pas
have
et ce que nous voulons obtenir.
defined crisis as the stage
Selon
you're in
Marx,
when you are
cette
moving away
crise
from
de
something,
civilisation
but not
est une crise beaucoup plus profonde.
able to achieve what you want. So you're in between what you don't want anymore and what you'd like to achieve. This is perhaps where we stand today.
Mais le fait que
And
nous avons
what
maintenant
we want to
besoin
do
de
is
comprendre
move
ce que
towards
nous voulons.
something else, leave inequality behind, and that's why we are in this
Dernière
crisis of
encyclique
inequality.
pape
The latest popes
sont très éloquents
encyclic
sur ce
are very, very
processus
clear.
qui attire
And I think
l'attention sur le scandale d'injustice
Pope Francis
causé par un
talks
monde de
quite
plus en plus
strongly
inégal.
about poverty and the impact of
Lors de la
inequality
rencontre
on
avec les
particularly poor communities. When the Pope met
dernier,
in February of last year
une des choses
with
importantes et révolutionnaires que le pape a
communion
dit
communities, he said,
que
I mean, he said many things, but one
n'est pas suffisant
thing that he
pour
said is
l'Église.
that for Christians, we should do more than just be a good Samaritan. Being the good Samaritan is not
Ce n'est
enough.
pas assez. La véritable éthique qui naît du
And the Pope says
christianisme
that
va au-delà du
Christianism
pour travailler sur les causes
should
de
trigger
façon à
more
ce qu'il
than
n'y ait
just
ni
good
blessés,
Samaritans.
ni
Good Samaritans.
délinquants
We
qui
need
causent des
to
blessures
create
aux
a world
Samaritains.
where there will be
Il nous dit que la
no more
transformation
suffering, no more pain, no more
est
hurt.
un élément
And he
inhérent
says
à
that
l'évangélisation.
this is totally structural to evangelization. Evangelization
On ne peut concevoir
it
une
is
action
what we
complète
want to do, and through
avec
evangelization,
la charité
we
chrétienne,
can
sans
develop
parler d'une
a
transformation structurelle.
spirit of
Il me
charity.
semble que c'est une
We
des
can
explications les plus claires sur la
also
façon
go towards
dont
a
cela
different
fonctionne.
structuring of human
Du point de vue du
societies.
christianisme
And I
dans
think
la
when you
réalité
read the
sociale,
words of the Pope, I think he explains that very,
il ne
very
s'agit
clearly.
pas de faire des actions
What
pour
we want
tranquilliser notre conscience.
Is not act because it makes us feel good about ourselves.
C'est très
We
intéressant parce que
do
le
that
pape
often, of course. We just
nous
do things
montre que
because
parfois
it
les
makes
bonnes
us feel
choses
happy about
peuvent
ourselves.
être contre-productives
But that's not enough. We need more than
parce
that.
qu'elles peuvent produire ce que
Sometimes
certains philosophes appellent
good
l'effet du vaccin.
deeds
Nous
can
sommes
be
tous
counterproductive. This is what is called the
parce que nous
vaccination
faisons quelque chose pour les pauvres.
effect. Basically, you
Mais nous n'éliminons pas les
do
causes de la pauvreté.
a little bit to support the
Nous
poor,
ne travaillons pas
and
sur
that
les
makes you feel good.
transformations
but you're not
structurelles.
actually doing anything to fight
Alors,
poverty.
dit-il,
And it's
faites
just
attention
a layer
pour que les choses que
of
nous
good
faisons
deeds over
un
a
effet
deep
du
wound
Nous
of
devons
poverty.
être très attentifs
And this is
à
what we want to
comprendre
avoid.
les
We
actions
need to make
sociales
sure that
qui
when we
agissent
act, we
pour
don't just
éliminer les
act
causes du problème
because we feel
afin
good
de
about
ne pas
acting,
nourrir
but because we want to deal with the underlying problems, and in this case, poverty and inequality. And we want to avoid this vaccination effect.
Dans le deuxième
What's
point,
that was my first point. I want to talk now maybe very shortly about how inequality creates poverty. With an example, Africa. And I'm talking a bit about, I would say, traditional Africa, because Africa is a very diverse continent and is changing, has changed. If you look at a traditional African family, you have the father. The father knows what he's supposed to do. He has a job, which is, for example, collecting firewood, so that you can cook and that you can warm the house, or the father would hunt to get food. He would protect his family. These would be his jobs. The mother would then consider that her main job is to care for the children, to cook, and to maintain the house, basically.
And so they were doing this for their families, and all these roles are equivalent. Not one of them is more important than the other. And all this creates joy, stability, balance, peace to the whole family. And so if a woman is in charge of care in the house, she will fulfill herself, and the man is protecting his family. And so we need communion between the two of them, and this was okay for everyone. At one point, for a new job, money came into the family instead of wood, and this new task is going to be considered as more important, more appreciated than the work of the mother, who, working within the family, doesn't get any money. And so this balance between the dignity of tasks is broken, and so an inequality enters the family. Inequality linked to poverty, and this will show you that inequality is going to create poverty. The woman becomes poor vis-à-vis men, and so this gives power to the one over the other, and the dignity is not determined like in the future. It's the amount of money you can generate that will be considered. And so there is an unbalance in the family, and this will lead then to the fact that if one of the two is weak, the other one should be stronger. And power is going to take over. Power will take a new connotation. And economic science has developed economic resources, financial resources, and has developed the production capacities. And this has done so rightly, but human resources still have to be developed to come out of exploitation and to have an optimistic type of anthropology. In the face of difficulties and human weaknesses, how are we going to give the possibility to a real relationship to the person? In order to reach this, all of us, we have to work together, as the Pope is telling us, work together for a new culture within society. In the third point, we are going to talk about the existential periphery, and here we take the case of poverty. There are different ways of seeing and conceiving poverty. The poor has his or her own way to experience poverty, to live poverty, and so
Le monde contemporain
The
a augmenté non
contemporary
seulement la
world
pauvreté, mais
has
aussi les formes de
generated poverty, but also the forms of poverty. And so poverty is not only a lack of material development or of need, but poverty is also a lack of country, of
de la justice,
family, of justice,
de
of
la
peace,
compréhension
of understanding
de son identité.
of
Et c'est
our own identity.
une chose est
And
certaine,
so one thing is
la
certain,
pauvreté est conçue
poverty
comme un état
is seen
d'infériorité.
as a state of inferiority because there is something lacking, because there is incapacity and there is suffering, there are tears and there is exclusion.
Si c'est possible, oui, je
Is it possible
Et on peut voir
to
une petite vidéo.
see this short video, please?
C'est pas moi que j'ai fait cette vidéo.
And I didn't do this video, no, I found it in Togo
Pourquoi j'ai fait ce choix?
somewhere. Why did I choose this video? Only
Toutes les images
because
qui sont,
all
je les ai vues de
the
mes propres yeux.
pictures
Alors, je peux témoigner que
I
ces
can see in this
images
video,
sont
I've
réelles.
seen it with my own eyes, and so I know that these pictures are the reality.
Il y avait beaucoup de choses qu'on pouvait dire sur la
There are many things we can say on this, but the pictures we have seen here can explain better whatever I would like to tell on this topic of poverty. And so here we have a new culture being proposed to us, culture based on love, because it's our way of seeing, of reflecting, of doing that should change. The fight against poverty for the economy of communion brings the person towards communion. Poverty is a social exclusion, that's for sure. And in order to reach a genuine culture of communion, such as proposed by the economy of communion, we have to experience a real encounter with the person. When two persons are meeting, they have the opportunity to discover each other, to exchange, to love each other, and once love becomes a reciprocal, mutual, then dignity will prevail for both persons. And therefore, the person is giving something to the other, and communion is creating between the two. The culture of communion is not only a relation or a communion between a rich and a poor. By this I want to say that communion doesn't mean that one always has to give and the other one will always be receiving. No. Culture, this is the culture of love where all are giving and all are receiving. It's a fraternal relation, and reciprocity will be a natural consequence of it. In the face of one person in a situation of poverty, let's remember that it is poverty which exists and not the poor. The poor is a brother or sister. They have a name and I should love them. I have the duty to love them. It is a person with great dignity and potential. This potential might be hidden by a pile of poverty and misery. The person cannot come out of it and fulfill himself or herself. And when it's not possible to come out of it, to come out of this poverty or misery, the person can still love. The person can still give something or receive something. And there are many gifts which are offered and we cannot receive them. We only need our eyes and our heart to see it. In front of a person, of a people, if we are only concerned by helping them, then it will show bluntly his or her poverty, and the person will convince itself of this poverty. The person will lose its richness and will become doubly poor, and so will be dependent on us. The person will think that he or she is not capable of coming out of this poverty. But if we enter the life of the other, if we try to understand his or her richness, wealth, then we establish a relation of equality, and the person will feel like we feel, a person like us, and we will feel reciprocity, a complementarity, and on this basis we will be able to exchange our poverties and our richnesses. And that's how communion is being created. And so communion belongs to all. We can exchange things, we can multiply things. We give the possibility to everyone to share poverty and richness and wealth. We need to find new possibilities of encountering the others, to try to go towards this diversity of the other. In this relation, first of all, we have to recognize the richness of the other person, and from there we will discover poverty. And in this exchange, the percentage of gifts, or the content of the gift will vary, but in communion reciprocity is total, same dignity, and we have not only to consider here a quantity but the quality of the gift of the other. Each party has to give the best, and this for the good of the other and his or her fulfillment. We cannot be obsessed by poverty. We have to be in relation with a person, and then we can find everything, wealth and poverty, and both should be complementary for the fulfillment of each person, of each human being. And we have to be ready for exchanging. Communion is proposed by the economy of communion and asks us to see reciprocity. We can give if we can also receive. We are free to give and to receive, and we cannot oblige anybody to give us something. If we do so, we'll be poor in return. No, we have to be joyful to receive. All of us will give and will receive, will be all rich. We cannot know the diversity of the other if we expect the other to be similar to us. We have to give the possibility to what's different to express itself. Communion leads to rich wealth, even economic wealth, and the person in situation of poverty should be able to express himself or herself. I cannot give you in return what you gave me, but I give you what's most precious, and what is most precious for that person. Each man, each woman keeps his or her dignity. We, at each moment, in front of each person, we have to defend their dignity, even if it is attacked from all sides, and we have to put an end to prejudices. And so we have to look into poverty, not in a sociological way, economic or racial way. No, we have to discover the values of life that we all have within ourselves. And the economy of communion is requiring helping those poorest of the poor, all human beings, and it is a spirituality of unity. It supposes love for each one. Real fraternity and communion, well, we'll build it when we'll be able to set up authentic and genuine, deep relations between the different persons, but equal persons, all of them being different but equal. And nobody, and especially not the poor, we always have to express this gift to the other. And poverty includes also wealth, values, richness, showing us that the other is also necessary to our happiness. And I will end with this PowerPoint. So I have to come on this side. I have tried to include it here. I have been exchanging yesterday with a lot of you, with so many of you, and we were wondering how to do it, how to understand everything we are saying. And communion has to be understood. Africa is a continent I'm coming from. It is a continent receiving a lot of the communion of entrepreneurs of the whole world. So what is it going to lead to in Africa? In 1991, when Chiara has started this economy of communion, Africa immediately joined it. And so we had the first enterprises sharing this. We had enormous difficulties, that's for sure. And at one point, the project had been, in fact, stopped. I can remember that Bruno was always telling us we cannot fulfill this economy of communion without Africa. And so in 2011, the International Community of Economy of Communion wanted to relaunch this project in Africa. And these are the data, the figures from 2011 to 2016, the last 5 years, and the project was launched during this period. So the number of enterprises and trading activities in Africa. So you can see Congo 25, Ivory Coast 2, Cameroon 3, Angola 5, etc. This is a map, and you can see where those enterprises are located on the continent. They have developed during the last 5 years. And the number of people employed in those enterprises and the trading activities of the economic of communion in Africa, it's 6,083 persons. So we gave work to more than 6,000 people. And these enterprises said that they were able to give 314,479 euros to the poorest of the continent. And the amount put at the disposal of African enterprises to help them, it was 1,107 euros. I just wanted to conclude briefly. I'm sure that you will be aware of the fact that the Pope said that the 19th of November would be the Day of the Poor, the first World Day of the Poor, and this day will be very important for all of us. I'm going to read one paragraph on what the Pope said launching this World Day of the Poor. I'll be reading the second paragraph. So the Pope is saying we are then called to give a hand to the poor, to meet them, to look at them in the eyes, to embrace them, so that they can feel the warmth of love, and they are extending their hands to us, and it is a possibility for us to come out of our certainties and our comfort to recognize the values of poverty. So, if we want to offer an efficient contribution for a real change of history by promoting real development, then it is necessary to listen to the cry of the poor and to commit ourselves to have them come out of their marginalization situation. At the same time, I'm reminding the poor that they live in our cities and our communities, and they shouldn't lose the meaning of evangelical poverty that is present in their lives. So thank you very much. Thank you, Geneviève. Now we will have a very particular work to carry out. We need to take a group picture, and I was told we have to do it now so that we can wake up. We are in the middle of the afternoon and we should wake up. So who can take a picture? Maybe that we have to come here in front of the room here, and please come so that we can take.
Kan je naar een PowerPoint? Tu sais tout?
ici sur
So here
la scène, il est déjà Luca Crivelli.
we have Luca Crivelli,
Continuer
who is going to
l'argument de la
go
pauvreté.
on, and
Luca
he
Crivelli,
will
il est
talk about
directeur
poverty.
du département
He's
de
the
l'Université des
director
sciences
of
appliquées de la
Department
Suisse italienne.
of Applied Sciences of Italian Switzerland, and he's also part of this international community of economy of communion. He writes articles on economy of communion and social enterprise. And today Luca is going to talk about an office, the Office of Observation and Research on Poverty, and he will tell us why this exists, what it is all about, what it is doing, and he will give us a few ideas for the future. Yes, thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and I'm going to try to speak in French. It's not my mother tongue, but I'm sometimes confused. I don't know, it's not easy for me to speak a foreign language. But my task is to give you information on this new work, OPLA. It's the Observatory on Poverty, and this is Leo Andringa, Dutch, and he died about a year and a half ago. And so I will tell you about the genesis of OPLA, this observatory for poverty. So why did we think it was necessary to create such an observatory? You all know that in the old scriptures, well, we spoke about Kairos. It is a moment when we understand that there is a special grace, and we can then go forward in a specific path. And OPLA is linked to a very specific moment. It wasn't very far away. I mean, it was in Mariankroon in the Netherlands, 19 to 22nd November 2015. It was 2 years ago that we had the idea of launching this observatory. And we were gathered with the Commission, and we wanted to go to the Netherlands because members of the Commission, Leo Andringa, he was weak, in fact. He was not able to go to Rome, so we went to the Netherlands. We wanted to spend a few days with him to understand how to go forward with this economy of communion. And these are the photographs. We were all in the room of Leo with his wife, Anneke. She was there too. And so we were able to really discuss about the idea of creating what Florencia also talked about yesterday. We wanted to analyze the enterprises, the business world. We wanted to give a meaning to the future. And so what was essential was to give a space to a new generation of entrepreneurs. We had the first generation, which was in fact going forward with this economy of communion, but together, side by side, next to them, we had to have young people also working on this. And so we were very enthusiastic with this new idea. And at one point, Lugino reminded us of an important point that Chiara Lubich was telling him when she was calling from to England and said, come to Rome to deal with economy of communion. He said, don't forget that this economy of communion was created for the poor. It was born for the poor.
And so we felt that at the center of this economy of communion we had companies. That was one pillar of the economy. For human beings need two legs to stand up. Animals fall in many cases, but so in addition to that one first leg or first pillar, we felt we needed a second one which was going to be a small observatory to study the question of poverty. Now, if you go on the internet, you will find a lot of information, of course. And when we say we wanted to set up an observatory, of course, we don't want to be excessively ambitious and create totally new information about poverty. But what is useful is collecting existing information and then reorganizing it, thinking about Chiara Lubbock's vision of communion, of course, in doing that. And I think this observatory was absolutely necessary. So, we said, let's start with a small observatory, and it was at the time that we took a totally different approach in terms of strategy. Until then, most people implementing an economy of communion project would do that as volunteers. So all the involved actors would be doing that on top of their job, on top of their commitment to society, on top of their family life. And that means you'd probably work most nights between midnight and 2 in the morning. And we thought that wasn't good enough. We needed to become better, more professional. Which is why we now, I remember at the time, we were, talking about, for example, Mohamed Yunus and his project. What he did is he came up with an idea and then he shared that idea throughout the world. If you want to do social business in the US, there is an office in New York, and you can go and see this office and they will teach you how to come up with a social business. So we thought maybe time has come for us to become better and more professional and stop just working with volunteers, which is why we started doing that. We've got people like Rebecca working for us as a paid employee, and we decided we would also we would become more professional and have one full-time paid employee at the observatory. Now, before I continue, let me talk about poverty and how to deal with it. Sometimes, as an entrepreneur, you think if you have a company which is based on the economy of communion, you have to be active, you have to innovate, you have to make profit, you've got to share that profit, of course, but you have to do what all companies do. And all companies in the world are pushed towards doing all of that. And we felt it applies also to us within the economy of communion. We need to generate profit. And we felt that we make profit and then it's easy, we just redistribute it, we share it, we've got networks, we've got people. It's not that easy. Now that we're 26-year-old, we've been in existence for 26 years, we know redistributing the money is not that easy. And it's very much the same when you talk about ending poverty in the world. You can't just deal with poverty within the Focolare movement, but you can't deal with poverty at global level either. And one subject that has been very much discussed is whether, some people believe that development aid is a system that generates dependence, which favors or promotes corruption, which also triggers what is called crowding out, because you come with money in Tanzania for, let's say, a health-related project, and by doing that, you discourage somehow the government from doing what it should be doing. And that means a government, since it doesn't have to invest money in hospitals, can use that money to buy weapons. And then there's another criticism that is often mentioned, which is the so-called tyranny of experts. Because there is a business there. Cooperation development is a business. You've got experts, people who are experts at development. What is poverty? What is development? Of course, they don't want to solve the problem, because if they do that, then it's the end of poverty and it's the end of their business and their job. So those are valid criticisms, I think. But then you've got people like Jeffrey Sachs, who's a friend of some of us here. I mean, we work with him. And he says that he's written a book called The End of Poverty. And he says, yes, of course, poverty is, is a problem. It exists. But the only way out of poverty is on your two legs. If you are able to walk out of it, you should. But it's not always easy to do that. And sometimes you start from such a low level, you've got climate affecting your ability to walk out of poverty, and that's why you need that little push coming from development aid. So some people say it's a business and it keeps people poor. Other people say it's a business maybe, but sometimes it can help some people stand up on their own two legs and then walk away from poverty. I'll show you this one slide before moving to really what we do within OPLA. What we have understood for several decades now is that poverty is not something that is related to flows. It's not just by transferring flows of money that you solve poverty. Herman said that clearly this morning, when he said that poverty is, you could be poor, living in a village, and everybody maybe would be poor, but at least people would be close to each other, would be friends, would work together, and at least they had that. Well, now that has also gradually been lost too often. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that despite poverty being multidimensional, what we need to do is try to understand it better, which is why we set up that OPLA Observatory. There's a bit of an issue with my slide here because we had a page that I wanted to share with you, but it was only available in Italian, and I can't seem to find the English version of. Let's see if the internet works well enough for us to show you that slide. I think I am connected, yes. And I think it's trying to load the page, but there's something that's not really working as it should. Yeah, since we're streaming this event, a lot of the bandwidth is used by the streaming, and this is why I can't really connect to the website. And now I can't close the window anymore. That's resilience for you.
Alors, c'est bien que j'ai fait des photos. Disons, ça, c'est vraiment le site internet, pas d'une façon interactive. On trouve les objectifs.
Okay, this is. This page is interesting in itself. You can see there OPLA. You can see the objectives there. On the website, you'll see more of that. You'll see videos. You'll see articles, texts. But of course, this is still the very beginning of this project. And what we want to do is do crowdsourcing, meaning bringing together all those people that can contribute to the observatory. So we're not going to do that ourselves. We're going to find and try to set up a network of people who can help. Now we're looking at the first 3 projects right now. They're almost finalized in terms of what we want to do. And the first idea that we have had is that we want to focus on best practices. Of course, there are many problems in the world. Let's focus maybe, instead of looking at problems, let's look at best practices, because there are countries out there that are doing well and there are nice projects. One such country is the Philippines. In the Philippines, you have a special commission that has been set up with Teresa Galfon. Earlier this morning we talked about this bank, bank in the Philippines. It's a rural bank. They use microcredit to support rural communities. Well, that lady works for that bank, and she is in charge of a commission. And so we've looked at the specific example of what's happening in the Philippines. And this diagram here shows something that's very interesting. It shows the number of people who were supported between 2013 and 2017. So people who were helped or supported in the Philippines. You can see clearly that, the trend is quite obviously downward. 300 people used to receive support in 2013. There's only 47 left now in 2017, in just 4 years. So of course that looks bad, maybe. But you have to understand what happened there. First, 3 things happened. First, we felt we need to translate into concrete action the principle of subsidiarity. So when you think about subsidiarity, it needs to become a reality. We need to make sure that if you help a community, it's not going to be on the basis of money being poured into that community from the outside. It has to be something that starts within the community, by pooling resources within the community. So, some friends of ours within the Focolari said, we can help, we can do something. And there's no need for us to ask money. Then we thought, are the people that we support the right people that really need support? Because obviously, and unfortunately, there were no clear criteria related to how urgent the situation was. So, should you support someone, a family whose kids need to go to primary school? Probably yes. Secondary school? Yes, probably. But what about a family that wants to send a child to university? Or where do you say, this is where we stop and this is where we stop supporting you? So we felt that there were people that were fragile but not poor, if you see the difference. And that's when we decided that we should establish criteria. And some people then decided, well, I don't really need to be supported anymore. I don't want to be supported because I'm actually not that badly affected by poverty, and there are other people that are poorer than me. And that's where we lost people there as well. And then there were people who were students. They were receiving support, but then finished their studies and found a job, so they also dropped out there. No need to support them. But then, the problem is, if all those poor people that we support go away, then what do? There's nothing left to do, is there? So, you've seen Geneviève's video, there is still a lot of poverty out there. So maybe what we need to do is look for the right poverty. For what's outside. Maybe we should look outside of our communities, because there are poor people out there. That's one interesting project in the Philippines. The second project we're looking at and performing right now, carrying out rather, is in Brazil. The idea here is to look at. In Brazil, there's poverty, of course, and we have teams working on poverty. And we want to look at what we call human flourishing. So, what is it that makes a people flourish from a human point of view? Because we don't simply want to solve problems, we also want people to flourish, humanly speaking. And that's where we established a sort of participative approach, on that dimension of human flourishing. We have now drafted a questionnaire, and we are now using this questionnaire with about 150 people that are still being supported in Brazil. And what we're trying to see is how we can help them, and how what we do can transform people's life. We've seen that when you create a company, and that company has as a main objective to fight poverty, you need to measure the impact of what you do. Very often, if you're a company, the way you measure success is your profit. The day has been good if at the end of the day you've made money, and you check your cash, and you see you've made cash. We think that's not enough. We're now looking at a methodology called the social network analysis, and we're trying to see how, through the economy of communion, people are getting something more than money.
Et moi, j'ai déjà un peu avancé, j'ai les deux choses. L'autre, c'était l'évaluation qui a été faite à Branquigna, un projet.
I also, well, you saw on the previous slide, a project in Branquigna. We're now moving to almost my conclusion, just to give you some time to talk as well. But if I may, 1 second.
Comme vous savez, dans le SWOT, il y a deux dimensions, la dimension interne.
To do the SWOT analysis. So SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you've got, I haven't looked at opportunities and threats, because that's what you do when you're competing. What I want to do is look at strengths and weaknesses. What are the strengths of our system? First, it's Licia. She has a PhD, she is an expert, she works for us, and she's doing this as a true professional. Also, another strength is the fact that we're collaborating with an NGO, and this NGO, AMU, is in touch with poverty in the world. Example, recently, AMU was rewarded for developing what essentially was a project of solidarity tourism. And then we're very close to the Sofia University. We've started working with the Sofia University, and I'm hoping that this is going to give us a lot of new ideas. We're working with students, PhD students. We know that students need traineeships with us, and data, and so they're coming to us, but we're also using them somehow to extend the network. What are the weaknesses? Well, the critical mass is in there. I mean, one person working full-time is not enough. And then what is really, really limiting us is myself. I mean, I want to dedicate more time. I would love to dedicate more energy. But after all, I still, have to spend some time with my family, and I'm still in charge of, managing my department. So I'm hoping that one day we'll find another director who has got more energy than I do. What about the future now? two ideas about the future. One is this. You saw this morning. It was a slide in Herman's presentation. Until today, we've very much looked at the distribution system, which takes place in our way, in our system, through AMU or through other networks. Some companies are now doing that, but locally, meaning they are, and this is interesting, they are developing a sort of local network, which involves civil society, which involves politicians, which involves communities, which involves local companies. And it's interesting maybe to, think about this system. Is it maybe better than the traditional system that we've used? Or, and this is what we've been talking about, is this a system that is more effective in terms of not generating dependence? We do randomized controlled trials, meaning you compare a placebo with an actual system. You do that very much in the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe a research project on that would be interesting. Maybe a comparative study would make sense there. And what are the impacts of what such a system could have compared to the traditional system? But I have something else that I want to share with you. And again, this is something that we discussed within the Commission. What could be the next step? We have got an observatory in place. What next? And we have the impression that we have somehow lost our proximity to poverty. Because clearly, the statistics show that poor people are disappearing out of our community, out of our meetings. So maybe what we need to do is change things, and we have identified two changes. And I'm going to quote Luigi there. Luigi used a nice metaphor when he talked about St. Francis. St. Francis heard a voice, and the voice said Francis, or Francesco in that case. So Francis, you must renew your church. And he thought the church is the building. You want me to renovate basically this whole building. So he started rebuilding the actual brick building, the church, the physical church. And after a few years, he understood that rebuilding the church did not mean actually rebuilding the actual building, but rebuilding the community of people who make up the church. So when we started, we thought that Chiara wanted us to look at poverty within our communities, to look at the members of Focolare. Now we understand that what Chiara wanted was more than that. And you can't really just stop at the borders of a specific movement like Focolare. So if we don't have pause anymore, it doesn't mean our job is over, because there are so many more people out there that need us outside. So what we need to do is not just look after our own poor, but other poor people. And I think we get that now. What's also key is what is the specific characteristic of the economy of communion? What is our identity? What makes us special from social businesses, from social companies, etc.? I'm not sure personally that what makes a difference is technical. I think it's the spirit of unity and the charisma of unity. Because we're not there just to be something special, we're there like the yeast. The yeast disappears into the bread or the cake, but it's there. And what we want to do is bring together people who are willing to fight for justice and for a more fraternal society. Meaning we felt we need to meet more people. We need to meet with experts of poverty. And then we feel that we need to come up with a plan for the 2018-2020 period, 3 years. And then we felt, let's find a date. And we said 18 to 20th October 2018. And that is also related to Jesus when he talks about unity. And so we felt we need to move forward now. And we've started asking people to participate.
So we didn't want to do something like a firework, something marvelous, but it's just burning in a few seconds and that's it. So we would be spending a lot of money just to organize a big firework or a big spectacle, and then we would go back home and that's it. No, we want to do something which will remain after the event, and this is why we started 1 year in advance. We said we have ideas and we are going to submit this to the discussion with our partners, those partners supporting us. And so there is a French association called ATD Carmonde. It was founded by Wrazinski, a Polish priest, and really they have put poverty as their life goal. And it's extraordinary to see how many things we have in common. And I mean, we have seen a marvelous speech put forward by them, and they show how the communion of Chiara is exactly similar to their ideas in their association about ATD Carmonde. He said, it's a dream that I had to take part in this lab. And so Pope John the 23rd, also he worked with him, and they wanted to work in the field of women in prostitution, so prostitutes and also human trafficking and all those problems, criminality, and La Madelphia is also taking part in it, and they look after children, orphans, and we had the mothers, yes, who these women who raised 70, 80 orphans after the war. I mean, they had lost their parents during the war. And then we had a last association with the climate change issues and all these environmental problems. And so we have started to work with all these people. And it's true that I'm also close to OPLA. I would like to know also how to face poverty in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Luca, for this analysis and for your vision to go on with this very important work. And we would like to give you time now, give time for communication, for dialogue now. And so we are going to give you the opportunity to take the microphone and to raise a question, make a comment, talk about one of your experiences, put forward a suggestion. So you have showed us that you were a small team. How could we act in our countries with, how can we contribute to your work from our countries? Well, the other members of the committee can help me in answering this question, but I believe that the idea is to listen to all those who have something to say about their understanding about poverty. They can all be part of OPLA, they can be a member of OPLA. I mean, it's not that we have a special status, not at all. The idea is to put in network all the people working on this topic. We start having young people in Argentina, in the Philippines, who also would like to make a research on OPLA. And this is marvelous because we could have this network everywhere in the world. It's not just to concentrate everything in OPLA, in the studies center. No, it's to use OPLA to establish this network between all those who are working in the field of poverty. In France, for example, you have a very rich experience and you also know how to deal with forms of poverty, and the idea of being part of the same network would be fantastic. It would be marvelous. So, how can we do this? How can we create this network? In our history of the economy of communion in France, we have had important contacts with organizations such as Aux Captifs de la Libération, or organizations with which we have strong relations of friendship. How can we establish a link between us and what you have already started? How are we going to put these people in contact? Yes, maybe the most efficient place would be the profit economy at this event, and maybe to have a call for contribution. And the fundamental question, maybe Florencia should be sitting here because she's also the leader of this project. So yes, come here. Can we speak in Italian, or would it be a problem for the translation? So we'll have to wait for the translation from Italian into French to come. Yeah. Wait. So it would be better to translate into French. Yes, I'm going to try to translate into French.
C'est seulement le début.
Donc, this is only the beginning. We needed to have a small group in order to manage this work, and that of course the work increased, and the whole idea now is to try to integrate all those organizations with which we have a local relation. Until now we haven't been doing anything at international level, and in fact we have our strategy, which was to organize a contest, a call for projects, and to send out invitations. In fact, these are called projects, and to go in that direction. And so the idea is not only to address those organizations and movements that we already know, and of course they will be the first ones to be invited, but also to reach other people that we don't know yet. And so during the program of this event, we would like to, in fact, strengthen the network. And in order to be able to create a common vision for the future. And to also start working together at international level. Maybe that later on we will have the opportunity to take part in the work of other organizations, and we would have also specific aspects taken up. But we had to start, and in order to start we needed a little group, a small group. Thank you. I would like to ask you, why did you use the word prophetic?
Luigi è la persona più adatta, però i profeti,
well, in fact,
sono coloro dicevano qualcosa, avevano una visione di come dovevano essere le cose.
So prophets had a vision. They were trying to see how to treat things in the future. They were announcing things. They were announcing models. And they were also denouncing what was not working properly. And so there are experiences of new economy, new approaches, and this is showing us a few paths, possible paths to follow, and they show it how the economy should be in order to include everybody and everyone, and also to try to tell us what does not already exist, what is to come. And so we believe that all these initiatives, all those projects and organizations have an idea of what the economy should be. And it's only together that we can have the overall view of the situation. The word prophetic. So, yes, I have to position myself here so you can see me on the streaming. So the idea we had at the beginning is that the word we wanted to use was the idea of this charismatic dimension of humankind, of humanity. And so this is an idea we had, that there is the charismatic dimension and the institutional dimension. And we were seeing this mainly in the church. But we also wanted this idea to be more universal than the church itself. And if today we use the word charism, it's an ambiguous word, I have to admit it, but it's also prophetic, but less. So in our reading of the situation, the charismatic dimension is the follow-up, the continuity of the prophetic message, of the prophetic dimension. the word prophetic is also used in the lay world, not only the religious world. And so the idea here is also to take up something similar to what happened in Together for Europe, and not only with the Christian world, but in a broader way, and not only looking at Europe. But we have to keep this idea of listening to the prophetic voice of today's economy, and we'll see what's happened in the future, and we'll see. So, as the Pope would say, we have to activate processes instead of occupying spaces. And she is the head of the project. And we have started the work with Luca and others, of course. And we cannot do this on our own, of course. It's the economy of communion of the whole of Europe which has to take part in this. Just to tell you why we use the word prophetic instead of charismatic. Just to say that even if today the associations all come from the Christian world, we have already envisaged of including the Indian economy, other economies. What was still there? ATD? But that has a religious root, ATD Carmont, but will go beyond the Catholic religious milieu and to include all different viewpoints. Do we have any other questions in the room? What language?
En espagnol pour la traduction.
In Spanish. So I'm going to speak in French. I'm here because I go to church every day, to Mass every day, and I have received in church a bulletin of Focolari, a little leaflet in September, and they were talking about this Congress. And so, well, I was attracted by this title, Economy of Communion. It inspired me. Spiritually speaking, for me it's really an inspiration. And commercially speaking, it's a project. And so this inspiration is interreligious. Vision, mission, objective, using a specific procedure, and all this based on biblical sites. The first idea is that this should be expressed in the verses of sacred books of monotheist religions. That's the first step. Well, I wanted to tell you, we have everything you need. I have already given copies of the things. I have it in Spanish. I have distributed this to few, but I have everything you need. Yes, I have everything you need. Thank you.
Merci. On va devoir clôturer.
Thank you. We will have to close our working session. No more questions. And then we have a break, and we'll have tonight for discussing furthermore. Thank you, Luca. Thank you for your presentation.
Et donc à 17h, on aura les workshops.
And so we'll have workshops at 5 o'clock. And you have the names of the rooms there on the posters outside. When you leave for Solidar, you have to be at the welcoming desk. And those wanting to go to Mass, it is at 6:30 sharp, here in this room. Yes, really 6 o'clock, 6:30 sharp. And Solidar, they will be here for Mass also, for the Eucharist celebration. Yeah, it is all organized, and you will leave at 8:30 at the welcoming guest tonight. And for the streaming, also thank you to all of you for the streaming organization. And don't forget to sleep or to do something else. For this additional hour you'll get during the night. For tomorrow morning now. Just one moment. We need more energy at the end, so we just wanted to tell you for tomorrow morning you can sleep 1 hour more, but there is a slight change in our schedule. We have Mass for those wanting it here at 8:30